I have read 20 books in the last 3 months. Let's talk about them, shall we? Hello there. Shall we get this thing started? First book in April, The Kingdom of Liars, by Nick Martell. This was part of a very unfortunate mishap back in mid-February. Okay. I put up a poll on the channel in my community page, asked you guys to pick which fantasy series you guys wanted to see me read in March. The thing about that was, I did film a fantasy vlog incorporating the first book in each of those series, just because I wanted to showcase them all. Terrible thing happened. Unfortunate mishap, shall we say. The footage got lost and corrupted. The video was unsalvageable. That's why you've never seen it, okay? But anyway, The Kingdom of Liars by Nick Martell. This is the first book in a trilogy called The Legacy of the Mercenary Kings. The Legacy of Mercenary Kings? The Legacy of the Mercenary Kings? I don't know. I call it Kingdom of Liars because it's a cooler name to say. This is the first book in that trilogy by Nick Martell. Wonderful fantasy. It merges the world building and the creativity of the magic system of Brandon Sanderson with like the grittiness of a Joe Abercrombie, but dumbed down for sure. The main character, Michael Kingman, he belongs to this ancient family that has essentially acted as a checks and balance to the king of the realm. And his father, when he was a little boy, was accused of killing the king's son. And so him and his siblings were then branded as traitors. This book gets wild. I am not a magic upfront fan. I don't need the magic explained to me. I don't want the magic explained to me. In this book, it does and it doesn't do that. I think what I really enjoy about this is that the magic has consequences. Regardless of your ability or your talent or your predisposition toward using magic, a little bit or a lot can cause you to lose memories. This is actually a reread for me. I read this back in 2022. I thought it was a great standalone until I found out earlier this year that it's actually a trilogy. I gave this a 4 out of 5. If you're into fantasy and you kind of want something that's kind of scratches several itches at once, boom. And if you're thinking about getting into fantasy and you don't know where to start, I think this is a great place. Hello again. The next book that I read in April was The Lies of Lamora by Scott Lynch. What an unexpected delight this book was. He checked off every single box that I have for my fantasy. It was gritty, it was humorous, it was fast-paced, it was action-packed. This felt like the Count of Monte Cristo meets Joe Abercrombie's The First Law, wrapped in The Godfather. Do I need to say any more? We follow a band of thieves, orphans, that were raised as thieves, and their plot to mess with the nobility, but of course they get wrapped up in political schemes, not only of the criminal underground, but also the people that run the state. And it is wild. The comedy between the characters. I cannot express to you how many times I laughed. The things that pull your heartstrings at this, because this is found family. I mean, this deals with a lot of heavy subjects. The characters go through so much. I loved everything about it from start to finish. This was a 5-star. This was my second 5-star read of the year. I couldn't be happier. I think this is for everyone. I don't think this is just for epic fantasy fans or high fantasy fans or grimdark fans. This is for absolutely everybody. One of my absolute favorite books now. Oh, hello there. As you can see, the third book that I read in April was Assassin's Apprentice by the queen of fantasy herself, Robin Hobb. I was not disappointed. This is the first book in the Farseer trilogy. I'm currently reading the second one as we speak and loving it even more than I love this one. And I loved this one a lot, let me tell you. But this was awesome. I was immediately enchanted with her writing, and I think she's my favorite prose of all time. I just wanted to keep reading the words that she wrote down on the page. She makes me want to speak more eloquently, and I know know I can be crass and vulgar and a downright barbarian. Miss Robin Hobb, you have made me want to do better. You meet young Fitz, who is the bastard son of the king-in-waiting Prince Chivalry. This is the most heartbreaking book, one of the most heartbreaking books I've ever read, because nobody wants Fitz. Nobody wants Fitz. And eventually the king does recognize him as his grandson, but with court politics and court intrigue going on, there's a lot of enemies after Fitz, of course, even as a young boy. And he just wants love, and he just wants family, and he just wants to be accepted. So the king calls him to be his assassin. So he learns under the tutelage of the current assassin. I could not believe how amazing this was. This was a 4.25, hands down. Robin Hobb. If you haven't read Robin Hobb, I urge you to. Didn't see you there. The fourth book that I read in the month of April was Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. The first book in Mistborn Era 1. I'm not going to mince any words with you. I did not enjoy this book at all. I'm gonna be straight up honest with you. But at the same time, this is not my first attempt at this novel. This is my fourth attempt at this novel. Fourth. This is probably the most attempted book in my physical TBR. The first time I tried picking this up was in 2017. I DNF'd it. I picked it up again in 2018. DNF'd it. I picked it up again in 2020. DNF'd it. And I picked it up again. Actually, this is the fifth time. I picked it up again in 2021, and can you believe it? I DNF'd it. I always got stuck around part 2, part 3, wherever somewhere in there, I just got bored out of my mind. And I felt this time I owed it not only to you all, but to myself to try and get past it and see what the excitement was all about. And I mean, I got there. First and foremost, I just don't like Brandon Sanderson's writing style. It's readable, it's accessible to everyone. If you want fantasy, you're gonna be able to understand, and it's not gonna be overcomplicated for no dumb reason. It's gonna be Brandon Sanderson. And I'm not gonna say the world was bad or that the story was bad. I don't really care about hard magic systems. He's the hard magic system king. I felt like the story and the characters were crafted around the magic system. It didn't feel like the magic system was like an organic thing of the world. It felt like Brandon Sanderson came up with a magic system and then slapped some characters and a plot together so that he could show it to the world. Like I said, I'm not saying it's bad, it's just not my taste. The thing that made me DNF it so much was I did not like the main character. I don't like Vin. I don't like Vin. It's hard for me to want to continue a book and or series if I don't enjoy the main character on the page. Now, I know people in the comment section are going to say, just go. Book 2 is great, book 3 is great. And the thing is, I bet they are. I'm going to be straight up with you. Don't know if I'm going to get to the sequels anytime soon. I mean, I did not like this to the point that I give this a 2.5. Hello again. The next book that I read for the month of April was The Iron King by Maurice Druon. Wow, if you haven't seen my attempting 7 books in 7 days, this is the first book that I read for that video. I loved this book. Historical fiction at its finest. This is the first book in a series known as The Accursed Kings. I'm a huge fan of the Song of Ice and Fire books by George R.R. Martin, so for him to say that this was the original Game of Thrones, that this is the series, one of the series that inspired him to write that magnificent epic fantasy series, wow, I loved this book so much. This was a 4.25, highly recommended if you're into historical fiction. Excellent, excellent book about court intrigue, court politics, brutal, vicious betrayals. I mean, he captured medieval society beautifully. Simply wow. And the last book that I read for the month of April was Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King. This was my first experience with Stephen King's crime fiction. I mean, he nailed it. He nailed it. A solid novel. I mean, it's Stephen King, man. It's really hard to miss with this guy. We follow a retired cop who gets a mysterious letter one day from an alleged mass murderer who's saying that he never was caught and that he's going to strike again. And so they strike up this correspondence, but then the clock starts ticking for this rush of, we gotta find this guy, we gotta, hot diggity dang. This book was so good. I think it was a solid 4-star book for me. If you're scared of getting into Stephen King, maybe try some of his fiction stuff. That's a great place to start. I think this or Billy Summers, those kinds of books are really great introductions, so maybe check that out. Storied Life of A.J. Fikry by Gabrielle Zevin. This was a really sad book, but it was also a very whimsical and humorous book. Gabrielle Zevin is also the author of Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which is a book I cannot stand. I also read this as part of my 7 books in 7 days. As you can tell, it's extremely short. But this is about A.J. Fikry and his life. The absolute curveballs that life throws at this man, but the love that he finds and the things that he learns to cherish and the walls that break down so that he can let people inside and that his life completely changes, and the absolute fetching sad ending of this book. It was good. And I love Gabrielle Zevin's writing. Her prose is absolutely beautiful. She has a talent for it, and I hope she never stops writing books. Golly, I gave this a 3.75. I know the way I'm talking about it sounds like I gave it a 5. Not a 5-star. I think just because I was doing such a fast-paced challenge and also all the crap happening behind the scenes at work and stuff, I just didn't enjoy this book as much as I could have. I just wanted to get through it, which is not a good reason to read a book. Talking to myself again. When am I not? I'm always talking to a camera. It feels like I'm only ever talking to myself. The next book that I read for the month of May was The Hunter by Richard Stark. Crime noir fiction at its freaking finest. This is the first book in like a 24-book series known as the Parker series or the Parker novels. And you're introduced to Parker, who is a sociopath, bro. Usually with crime fiction, you're following like a detective or cops. But in this book, you're following a criminal. Parker is a thief, but he's also a murderer. He's also let's just say he's committed many felonies. And I loved it. This was gritty. This was gnarly. This was outright brutal in some points. I gave this a 4.75. I'm stoked to read the other novels. I am so stoked. I'm here for the Parker books, and I cannot imagine where Richard Stark takes this character, but I'm excited to find out. It's a little dark, if you can see it. The next book I read for the month of May was No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. I was disappointed in this book. Not because it's a bad book, or it's a bad story, or that Mr. McCarthy's a bad writer. In fact, I actually really like the story. This book probably has the greatest antagonist ever written. He's nuts. The thing I didn't like about this was that I just don't appreciate how Mr. McCarthy doesn't use quotation marks when people are speaking. That's all I ask. I'm sorry, it's important to me. I need to know who's talking. I need to know who's talking to whom. I need to know because it's so incoherent. For that, I really could not get behind this book. I think I gave this, I don't know what I gave this. It was like a 2.5, 2.0, something like that. That's how I feel about it. Just was not my taste. It wasn't for me. I wish I could say Cormac was an author I enjoyed, but this is the second book of his that I've read now, and I just not vibing with it. Funny Story by Emily Henry. I am an Emily Henry fan. I think she's a wonderful author. Anyone who just looks at romance and goes, man, there's nothing there. I think maybe you should check out an Emily Henry book because her books they have more of a literary fiction feel to it because she goes into, explores human relationships in such a way that some other romance that I've read just doesn't even come close. She really delves into how these people became who they are because of how they were raised or how they were not raised. it seems like every book that I've read of hers, these people have family issues, and these family issues are so relatable. Not that I had what these people have, but that it's just relatable that families are complicated. And that comes through very, very well in her writing. And of course, the romances that bloom in her books, especially the one that bloomed in this one, was just amazing. I mean, her banter between characters is so funny. But we meet Daphne is engaged to this man, and he up and says, you know what, I'm still in love with my childhood best friend, so we're calling it off. So she has to move in. She has to move in with her fiance's childhood best friend's ex-boyfriend. You can only imagine the shenanigans, the outright hilarity, the laughs, the cries. Everything about this book was so funny. I gave it a 4-star, maybe a little bit more, maybe like a 4.25. I just enjoy her writing so much. It was wonderful. I finally finished this. I think I started this book middle to late March, something like that, and it took me until May. But it was stunning. Wow, I didn't expect to fall in love with this book like I did. Now, I know it's got its problems. I know, or people feel like the author, Margaret Mitchell, was biased. But this is a romance novel set in the Civil War South. We're stationed in Atlanta with Scarlet OHara, who is one of the most selfish, conceited, narcissistic, infuriating characters I've ever read, but at the same time, I don't know how she can be so bloody dang endearing. I mean, there's so much that happens in this book. This book is over 1,000 pages. I feel like Margaret Mitchell captured a moment, and whether you agree with how she got to her conclusion or whatever, I didn't really have a problem with how she wrote the story. I mean, the story was fine. The story was great. That's what I came for. I didn't really come for the historical aspect of it. I came for this legendary duo of Scarlet OHara and Rhett Butler. I loved this book so much I give it a 5-star. It's probably the best romance book I've ever... Well, that's not true. That's not true. The last and final book that I read for the month of May was We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle. It was such a surprise. To be honest, it was one of those books there for at least the first 150 pages or so that I was like, do I put this down? Why am I not invested? But then something would happen that would get me invested. But by halfway, I was just like, dude, what is going on? This was amazing. This is the first book in, I think, what's known as the Last War trilogy. I mean, if you're a fan of grimdark, here you go. Look no freaking further. I think I gave it like a 3.75. This explores war and the effects of war and occupation and the effects of occupation and a host of different things. This is stellar. Absolutely worth it. The first book that I finished in the month of June was 11/22/63 by the king himself. I love this book. Time travel, historical fiction. Leave it to Stephen King to write a book like this. A man goes back in time to try to prevent the assassination of John F. Kennedy. This book, perfect. It has everything you want. It has twists and turns. It has ups and downs. It has romance. It has everything you want. And of course, it's Stephen King, so it's the most unique thing you'll read all year. It was highly recommended to me. It's been on my radar for a very long time, and I hate that it took me this long to get to it. I really, really do. It was a 6-star read. It's the best book I've read all year, and it's definitely one of the best books I think I've ever read in my entire life. Pick this book up right now. Again, one of those books that if you're scared to get into Stephen King, I highly recommend this book. It is chunky. 850 pages or so, but worth every single page. Lovely War. second book I read in June. This is a book that my wife absolutely loves. She read this about 2.5 months ago, something like that. Of course, she wanted me to read it immediately. So when we played a little TBR game, go watch that video. When we played a little TBR game, she won and I had to read this book and I do not regret it. This was wonderful. Historical fiction, historical romance. We follow 4 very enchanting characters and their fight and struggle during World War I and how they fall in love and how over all of this, we're being told the story by Greek gods. Specifically, Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. She's on trial for crimes against her husband. It's a very interesting way to write a novel. I think that's the thing that I was so impressed with, that the author was able to write in multiple tenses at once. This book has so much tragedy to it. So much tragedy. You get a lot of historical insight into some stuff that people don't talk about. My eyes were open to a lot of stuff that I didn't know happened. An absolutely beautiful book. I gave this like a 3.75. I think I would change that to a 4 or a 4.25, somewhere in between there. I think I'm landing more on 4. It's an excellent novel. I think anybody can pick this up and have a good time with it. Oh, didn't see you there. The next book that I read for the month of June was Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. Coming of age story about a boy named Corey in a little town known as Zephyr, Alabama. The hijinks that this boy gets up to, but also the really heartbreaking stuff that happens in this town. At the beginning of the book, Corey and his father are out early morning. Corey's helping his dad deliver milk because he's a milkman. Come across a car wreck and this car plunges into a lake. There's a man in the front seat and I mean, he's handcuffed to the wheel. He's been strangled with a piano wire. So all of this evidence, this murder evidence, sinks to the bottom of the lake. The effect this has on the town and all the stuff that goes on afterward is nuts. This not only is a coming of age story, but it becomes a murder mystery thriller at the same time with pretty high stakes. This is probably my favorite Robert McCammon book so far. It kind of gave me It by Stephen King vibes, but not just without the clown. And the fight against good and evil at the end. It just had that feel of innocence being slowly lost as one grows up and has experiences, and how even in a small secluded town like Zephyr, a lot of hard stuff can happen to a lot of people. Just a really, really introspective novel. Loved it. Literary fiction at its peak, man, at its finest. I love this book so much. I gave this a 4.25, I think. I think I might change that and give it a 4.5. Final Girl is by Riley Sager. This was this was a book I read in June. It was okay. I was expecting more from Mr. Sager. Right now he's one of the leading mystery thriller, slasher, horror writers of our time, and he let me down. I went into it thinking it would be more thrilling than it was, but it just felt like a bunch of fluff until we got to the end. So for that, I give it a 3-star. We're moving on. Emily Henry, back at it again with Beach Read. Beach Read, oh my gosh, 2 authors that get into writing slumps swap genres with each other. They make a bet with each other that in 3 months, yep, I'm doing a really terrible job at doing this. We follow 2 authors, January and Gus. They've come to this little town to write their novels, and they're both stuck, man. He's trying to write this, great American novel, literary fiction, and she's trying to write a romance novel. They make a bet with each other that they swap genres, and then in 3 months, let's see who can write the best book, or let's see who can finish a book. Accompanying that, they need to do research. So they go on these Friday and Saturday outings, which are technically dates. She takes him on like carnival rides, and then he takes her to interviews with people that survived, backwoods, death cults. All's well that ends well with this book. It was charming, it was delightful, it was witty, it was funny. It's Emily Henry, of course, so there's going to be some thought-provoking relationship, character-building moments, and I really am happy that I read it. This is my least favorite Emily Henry book so far. I gave it a 3.75. Billy Summers by Stephen King. And this is your first experience with me. You probably know by now that I love Stephen King. He's my favorite author. Pretty much everything that I read by him is an instant favorite. Billy Summers is no exception. We follow an Afghanistan veteran turned hitman who kills bad guys. He takes one last job before he retires for $2 million, but it's a setup and he has to go on the run, and everything that could go wrong does go wrong. But we meet some delightful characters along the way, especially precious Alice. Oh, Alice and Billy's relationship is so beautiful, man. It's like father-daughter, found family. I love it so much. And the ending took me by total surprise, not only with what Billy has to go and do, but what happens after. And it just tears your heart out, but it gives you so much hope. I don't know, this book had it all, man. This book had it all. It's a 5-star read, 6-star read. I cannot recommend this book enough to anyone who wants to read Stephen King. Scott Lynch, you dog. Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch. The second installment in the Gentleman Bastards sequence, where we pick up with Locke and Jean in this incredible, gritty, dirty world. We meet them on the seas and they're trying to, of course, con people that they just should not be conning. And they get involved in not one, not two, but 3 major conflicts, and they get sucked in, and they get blackmailed or poisoned or something to keep them involved until the job is done. And it just seems impossible, man. Scott Lynch just builds on these plots with these funny, lovable, endearing characters. Scott Lynch is a master at concealing stuff from you until he finally reveals it, and then you're just like blown away, jaw on the floor, can't pick it up again. Dude, I'm in love with The Gentleman Bastards. I'm convinced this is one of my favorite series of all time now, and I've only read 2 books. This isn't quite a 5-star like Lies of Lamora was. This is about a 4.5. Folks, we're done. Those are the 20 novels that I've read in the past 3 months. I finally feel like I've reached a good pace as a reader. I read on average somewhere between 5 and 7 books a month now, and I really enjoy that because I've slowed down, I'm appreciating the things that I'm reading, and I've committed to myself that if I'm not enjoying a book and I've given it at least 100 or so pages, or maybe even halfway, and I'm not vibing with it, I just DNF it and move on to something that I want to read. But folks, thanks for listening to me ramble. I tried to make this wrap up as interesting as possible instead of just me sitting down all the time. I tried to make it a vlog. That's how we roll on this channel. We keep it goofy and we keep it spontaneous. But anyway, folks, thank you so much. Bye.